No one heard a newborn cry the day Lucas came into the world. He arrived 3 weeks early, small and fragile, barely 5 pounds, but the silence was the hardest part. He didn't cry, didn't kick, and his tiny legs just lay still. In that quiet delivery room, Grace and Daniel felt the world tilt beneath their feet as doctors worked quickly, running tests, whispering updates. Then came the words that changed everything. Paralyzed from the waist down, likely permanent. I'm so sorry. There was no trauma, no medical mistake, just one of those rare, cruel things that sometimes happen. Everyone kept saying he can still have a good life, but to Grace and Daniel, hope felt impossibly far away. 2 days later, they brought Lucas home to a house that felt hollow and silent, once filled with baby plans and laughter. Grace barely left the crib, brushing Lucas's hair with trembling fingers, whispering over and over, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Daniel tried to stay strong, but alone in the kitchen, he'd grip the counter, fighting back tears. They canceled the welcome home party, turned away family who wanted to visit, and let therapy pamphlets pile up on the coffee table untouched. The only sounds were the soft click of the baby monitor and the wind pressing against the windows. Then came the storm. Rain lashed the roof, thunder shook the walls, and Daniel was waiting for a grocery delivery when the doorbell rang. But when he opened the door, there were no groceries. Instead, he found a German shepherd, a big dog, strong yet thin, his fur soaked and clinging to his ribs, huddled on the porch. Beside him sat a battered cardboard box, half collapsed under the rain. Inside the box was a handful of dry dog food, a torn blanket, and a crumpled note that simply read, I can't keep him. Please give him a good home. He wasn't a puppy. He was nearly full grown, probably around 2 years old. No collar, no chip. Just a pair of deep, intelligent eyes staring up at Daniel as if he'd already decided he belonged there. Grace didn't even hesitate. She wrapped him in a towel, held him close, and whispered the same words she'd whispered to Lucas. I'm so sorry, but you're safe now. They named him Max. At first, Max felt like another challenge. Lucas needed constant care, diaper changes, careful repositioning, checking his circulation, and Grace was exhausted while Daniel was burning out. Meanwhile, Max shadowed Grace everywhere, lay beneath Lucas's crib, barked softly to strangers, and watched the baby with unwavering focus. Daniel even thought about giving him up because a big dog was one more mouth to feed, one more responsibility. But then, everything changed one quiet night. Grace lay on the nursery floor, drained and hollow, staring into the dark. Max padded over, curled beside the crib, and gently rested his big head on the crib rail, eyes locked on Lucas. And that's when Grace saw it. Lucas's tiny fingers twitched just once, but it was something. The next day, she whispered to Daniel, I think Max calms him. He sleeps better when Max is close. Daniel was doubtful until he saw it for himself. One evening, Lucas screamed inconsolably for hours. Nothing worked. Not rocking, not singing, not warm bottles. Then Max trotted over, placed his head on the crib rail, and let out a soft, low whine. Within seconds, Lucas stopped crying. Then came the day that changed everything. Grace had stepped out for groceries, and Daniel, running on barely 3 hours of sleep, nodded off on the couch. Lucas lay swaddled in his crib while Max rested nearby, eyes half closed but always alert. Then came a faint thump and sudden silence. Max's ears shot up, and he bolted for the nursery, claws skidding on the floor. Lucas had somehow shifted, rolling dangerously close to the crib's edge, his paralyzed legs caught between the slats and his tiny head hanging inches above the hardwood. 1 more inch and he'd fall, his neck too weak to handle the impact. But Max didn't panic. He moved forward, steady and careful, rising on his hind legs to press his big frame against the crib. He nudged Lucas's chest gently with his muzzle, once, then again. Lucas whimpered. Max paused, then gave one final push, and Lucas slid safely back into place. Moments later, Daniel woke to Max's low, urgent whine. He rushed into the nursery and froze. Lucas was safe and wide-eyed, while Max stood beside him, panting softly, one paw still resting on the crib rail. Daniel grabbed the baby monitor, heart pounding, as he rewound the footage. Pixel by pixel, he watched the entire scene unfold, the danger, the fall, and the dog who didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees, pulled Max close, and whispered, "You saved him." That same night, Grace and Daniel rushed Lucas to the hospital. They explained everything, the fall, the video, the subtle movements they'd started noticing.
Doctors ordered new scans. Hours crawled by under harsh fluorescent lights until finally the specialist returned and said, "It appears Lucas's spinal damage may not be as complete as we thought. Some of the nerves we assumed were inactive are starting to show early signs of communication." Grace blinked, her voice trembling. "Are you saying?" The doctor nodded. "I can't promise miracles, but there's a real chance your son may regain some motor function, possibly more." Grace collapsed into Daniel's arms, this time sobbing not from grief, but from hope. From that night on, everything changed. Lucas began responding more, especially when Max was near. His fingers curled tighter, his breathing steadied, and even the stiffness in his shoulders started to fade. Every morning, Grace laid Lucas on a soft playmat, and Max lay beside him, close enough that their breaths seemed in sync. If Lucas cried, Max nudged his hand with his nose. If Lucas seemed distant, Max rolled a toy gently toward him and barked once, never more. They recorded everything. One afternoon, Max nudged Lucas's favorite plush elephant just out of reach and sat back and waited. Lucas stared for a moment, then reached forward and grabbed it. Another day, Max mimicked a therapist's movements, circling behind Lucas and pawing the floor to keep his attention. The therapist whispered, "He's not just watching, he's teaching him." They weren't just a boy and his dog anymore. They were partners. And then one quiet Sunday morning, sunlight poured through the nursery window. Lucas lay on his mat, Max beside him, the stuffed elephant between them. That's when it happened. Lucas pushed with his shoulders, pressed his arms into the floor, and lifted his chest off the mat for the first time. Grace came running. Daniel replayed the footage again and again, tears blurring his eyes. Grace knelt beside her son, whispering, "He's coming back to us." Daniel smiled. "No, he's just getting started." On Lucas's first birthday, the doorbell rang. A woman stood on the doorstep, eyes red and clutching a dog collar. "That dog, he's mine. His name is Kaiser. My husband abandoned him while I was away. He left him there with only a box and some food. By the time I came back, he was gone. I've been looking for him for nearly a year." Grace stepped forward, Lucas in her arms, while Max stood protectively between them. They invited the woman inside and showed her the videos. Max saving Lucas, helping him, changing his life. She watched, silent tears rolling down her face. She said, "He saved your son?" Grace nodded. "We didn't adopt him. He adopted us." She knelt, and Max approached, sniffed her hand, then turned back toward Lucas. The woman whispered, "He made his choice." She knelt beside Lucas and said softly, "You're the little boy who gave him a new job." Lucas reached out and offered her a piece of cake. She laughed through tears as Max gave a quiet bark, as if to say, "That's right." From that day forward, Max never wore a collar again, because he wasn't just a dog, or even just a hero. He was family. And Grace and Daniel realized that sometimes the miracle you're waiting for doesn't come the way you expect. Sometimes it walks into your life on 4 strong legs, soaked in rainwater, and saves your whole world without saying a single word.